Oh.
All right, we want to welcome everyone tonight to the Cedar Rapids Community School District Board of Education meeting. It's Monday, July 16th, 2018. So welcome everyone tonight. With that, we call the meeting to order. Would somebody like to read the approval of the agenda?
I move that the agenda of Monday, July 16th, 2018 Board of Education meeting be approved as set forth and that each item is considered ready for discussion and/or action.
Is there a second?
Second.
And this is a roll call vote.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
Director Jansen.
Aye.
Director Borcherding.
Aye.
Director Jacobo.
Aye.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
President Laverty.
Aye. Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to Dr. Buck and the Superintendents Report.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, President Laverty. So a few items for tonight. Discover Summer Camp recently wrapped up another successful session. More than 200 students from the district and the surrounding schools attended the camp this year. It was held at Roosevelt Middle School for students in grades 3 through 5. The camp's most popular courses were the science-focused options. So this has been a wonderful tradition in our district and serves as one of many options students have during the summer to remain engaged in learning. My wife Tracy and I recently attended, that's Tracy. My wife Tracy and I recently attended the annual Zach Johnson Foundation Gala, a fundraiser for Kids on Course University. It was a pleasure to meet Zach Johnson. That's Zach on the left. I'm in the center for those playing along. And hear from both he and his wife Kim firsthand about their passion for supporting the academic growth of students in our school district. More than 700 students are enrolled in Kids on Course University this summer, and our school district is proud to partner with the Zach Johnson Foundation to offer this valuable opportunity to our students. The University of Iowa conducted a study on the academic impact of KCU last summer and found 50% of KCU students started the next school year with higher reading scores than they did at the end of the previous year, and 80% students saw growth, grew their math skills over the course of the 7-week summer program. No other school district in Iowa is administering a program of this type at zero cost to participating families. And the last number I heard on the 2-day event is they raised just north of $1.3 million. So, yeah, pretty exciting stuff. Last week, the KCU students had an opportunity to participate in an outreach event sponsored by the Cedar Rapids Police Department called Catch with a Cop. The Cedar Rapids Police Department stopped at Johnson STEAM Academy to throw the ball around and invited young along Cedar Rapids Colonels players. The participating members of the police department appreciate this opportunity to bond with students and talk with them about their chosen career path. What a great opportunity for our young learners to hear more about one of the many careers they may consider. And speaking of career paths, in collaboration with Workplace Learning Connection, our district has 34 students enrolled in summer internships. Summer internships are 45 to 90-hour work-based learning opportunities, and internship positions range from riding instructor with the Greenbrier Riding Academy, which is a horse stable in Springville that offers riding lessons and horse training, to a molecular biology assistant at Cornell College, a physical therapy volunteer at Mercy Medical Center, a librarian at the Cedar Rapids Public Library, an architect with OPN Architects, and experience working with urban farming at Matthew 25. These work-based learning opportunities create valuable opportunities for lessons in collaboration, creativity, citizenship, communication, and critical thinking, all skills we believe future-ready graduates should be equipped with under our new profile of a graduate model. And with that, I want to do one other piece of business. Are you ready to help with this, Noreen? All right, very good. So we have some new team members with us here tonight. So they're going to come up here, and I'm going to do some quick introductions, and then each of them is going to give about a 10-minute no, that's not true at all. So let's see, Craig Barnum. So Craig, give us a little wave there. Thank you. Craig Barnum has been hired as Executive Director of Digital Literacy. Before joining us, he spent 19 years as the Director of Technology and Information Services for College Community Schools. So welcome, Craig. Dave Nicholson, so Dave, that's Dave, has been hired as our new Chief Financial Officer and Manager of Operations. Dave was the business manager, it says AEA 267. What's it called now?
Central Rivers AEA.
Yeah, thank you. In Cedar Falls for almost 5 years prior, and before that he was CFO with Linn-Mar Community Schools. Right? John Rice, this is John. Welcome, John. John Rice has been hired as the Executive Director of Instructional Services. He most recently worked in Washington, D.C. Public Schools, where he was the Director of Instruction and Blended Learning prior to joining us here in CRCSD. And you have exactly 1 day under your belt. Is that right? 10 hours. Oh, yeah, there we go. So, welcome to the team. And finally, Ryan Reedstrom. Ryan has hired as the Associate Director of Access and Instructional Design. Prior to joining us, he served the College Community School District for 9 years as a middle school, high school science teacher, an associate principal, and most recently, curriculum coordinator prior to joining us. So welcome to the team. It's great to have you here. Yeah,
Absolutely. Welcome on behalf of the board. We're excited to have you part of this, and it definitely is a team. So
thank you. Thanks, gentlemen. With that, I'm up.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Buck. Great report. Lots of exciting things going on even over the summer months. So, board reports. Does anybody on the board have anything they would like to bring up tonight? Nope. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and move on then to communications, delegations, and petitions. And I don't believe, received any requests to speak before the board tonight. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that the board would like to pull for further discussion or questions? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as published.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great, and this is a roll call due to the personnel report.
Director Jansen.
Aye.
Director Borcherding.
Aye.
Director Jacobo.
Aye.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
President Laverty.
Aye, thank you very much. Next, we'll move into learning and leadership and hear a report from the Security Task Force and their recommendations. I'll turn it over to Noreen Bush.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. And if the team wants to come up and join me, that would be great. Or if you can stay from wherever you'd like. But we have, several of us are going to comment on what's our Security Safety Task Force, which actually you'll see on the title of the slide, really evolved into a focus on response to active threats to our district and to make sure that we have protocols and procedures in place, which we do, but how we might enhance where our current state is. So we really assessed our current state and thought about our future state with this task force. You'll see the folks in front of me. Laurel Day has spearheaded this for a long time with our district, and so, of course, has been part of this task force. Dr. Buck will be making some comments as well. Captain Essling, representing the Cedar Rapids Police Department, and Trista Martinek, who is our Harrison Elementary principal, but has a passion in this area and has experience from another district and how this looks as we consider our next steps. So, just to give you an overview, we're all going to contribute to our conversation tonight, but Laurel's going to kick us off with a little bit of the focus of this group and where we've been, and then lead into what surfaced as our primary goals as we move forward as a district. So I'll hand it over to Laurel first.
Thank you. Good evening, and as you know, security of our students and staff at the Cedar Rapids Community School District has always been a top priority. What recent world events had led us to want to do a deeper dive into where our security measures were headed, focusing on the recommendations that we would come forward with via a task force, and it would help to enhance our current state of security in the school district. Next slide. So the task force was formed in March this past spring, and it included about 50 individuals, and they represented our students, our staff, local law enforcement officials, including Cedar Rapids and Hiawatha Police Departments, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Lynn County EMA, and our former Northern District of Iowa U.S. Attorney. It also included a member of our Cedar Rapids City Council, district parents, and administrators. So we met 3 times. We met in April, May, and June, and during our meetings we gained knowledge about our current state of security procedures and training and tools. And then we wanted to invite other school districts to come and give us an overview of what they were doing as kind of an opportunity to learn about their best practices. So following all of our research and learnings, we had numerous conversations about how we could get around to enhancing our security protocols. We came up with a subcommittee then who put together all that information that we collected. They served as the drafting team to present a plan proposal to the entire committee then for their feedback, which leads us to being here tonight with our plan and our proposal.
So that led us to our desired outcomes. And so we're going to review 5 of those desired outcomes this evening. Dr. Buck will be kicking it off with our general, more comprehensive outcomes, but then Trista's going to zoom in on that student and professional learning lens and the second and third outcomes. And then around practice and drills, Captain Essling will make some comments, and then I'll summarize with communication protocols. So we'll start with Dr. Buck.
So what you hear in that is some main themes have emerged as we've worked through this process. And the first item that's up there is a recommendation related to adding a school security and crisis response supervisor. So we've had a person in the role of leading and directing this work in the district, and she's done a really great job. And she has a number of other responsibilities that she does on a day-to-day basis. And so one of the things that emerged in this conversation was, what if we had a person whose singular focus each day was to get up and think about what we're doing with safety and security? So one of the recommendations in this is that we go out and hire a supervisor who would be responsible day-to-day for this work. Then a follow-up to that is a responsibility that person would have is to create a district safety committee with staff representing from each of the levels, as well as middle school and high school students on that group as well, so that we can do an even better job of coordinating the work that's underway related to safety and security in the district. And then one other piece, and because mine is the general slide, it's the overview things. It's the person, it's an organizing event of the schools and adding some students into the conversation as well. We did have students on our team, and they bring wonderful, amazing perspectives, and we believe they'll do the same thing on this newly created district safety committee once it comes into place. And then this common learning management system. So come up with a way to make sure that all of the resources that are available in the district are in one sort of clearinghouse repository. So that was one of the items that emerged in conversation out of here. And I don't have a bullet point on this, and I don't think it's on the other slides because it wasn't directly a recommendation of the committee, but we're doing some work with locks on classrooms that I think the board would be interested in knowing more about. And in addition to that, I would just throw out one more thing. These are sort of the large, big idea that came out of this committee. There is other specific individual work underway in our buildings that we won't likely get to tonight. Quick example would be Jefferson. If you were to go to Jefferson High School right now, there's a project underway at Jefferson High School that's, if you're familiar with when you walk into Jefferson High School, you can walk into Jefferson and you're not greeted by anyone. The office is up and to the right if you're familiar with the structure of Jefferson. So we're actually changing the vestibule area at Jefferson so that the second set of doors are moved and there'll be attendance windows there. So you'll come into the first set of doors at Jefferson, you'll be greeted by an attendance person, and they'll buzz you then into the second set of doors once they understand what your business is for the day. So there are other things like that that are underway that we won't get to that level of detail, but mine's the general one to start.
Thank you.
Okay, so one of the things we became very passionate about was teaching our students about all of these active threats. And one of the outcomes that we wanted to make sure we addressed was that all of our students would have an understanding of what their response could be should an active threat, be presented in a school. So one of the things we talked about, our current state right now is that we are practicing drills, being tornado, fire, and a lockdown in the sense that we are all hiding. And what we came to find out through our research is that may not be the best route should there be an active event within our school. Maybe hiding is not the best option for us. So we talked about what are our options for that. And we decided that in order to do this right, we needed to slow down a little bit and come up with a little bit more research to be able to teach our kids. And I love this little clip art here because we want to be able to do the right thing without freaking our kids out. And as a principal, the one thing that teachers are really afraid of is saying the wrong thing. And so we want them to be prepared and we want them to be able to teach our kids the right thing, but we want them to do it comfortably so that they know that what they're saying isn't making kids afraid. So our timeline here is that we would, the first bullet, having our students participate in all safety drills at least one time within the first 20 days of school. And we're recommending that we practice fire, tornado, and lockdown the way we are doing it right now, and that is being hiding. The next part of the timeline kind of draws things out a little bit over the course of the next year. We'd like district staff, in cooperation and coordination with the committee, to create some lesson plans that we can use to teach our kids so that there's some consistency between how Harrison does it, how the high schools do it, how other schools do it. So we're kind of all doing it the same. That would come over the course of the first semester. We want that to be done by January. Then after that, we would be able to provide our students with those drills, including running, including fighting for our older kids. Obviously, we wouldn't teach our little guys, our kindergartners, our first graders what it would be like to fight, but we might have that conversation with them because that could be our reality at some point. After that, we'd like to work with law enforcement to do those drills in a way that's consistent across the district. And in order to get 31 schools through that, it's going to take some planning and some time. So we realize that this can't happen right away and that we would need some time to plan, to prepare, and to make sure that we're doing it correctly. So our goal for that is March of 2019. So we would take this first semester to write all of those lesson plans for the student use, or for the teachers to use with the students. And then in March, we would be prepared to actually carry out those next steps of drills. All right. The next part is staff professional learning. So once we get all of the lesson plans and everything prepared for the teachers to actually do, we're going to have to roll this out to our staff. That was another lot of conversation about how quickly we can move things with a district this large. So our plan here is for all of our staff, and this includes everybody, teachers, custodians, lunch associates, all of those people, everybody that's involved, to have an understanding and possible reactions to something that may happen within their building. Right now, like I said, we've practiced fire, we've practiced tornado, we've practiced hiding. We haven't practiced anything else. So if a threat comes to us, we just hide right now, and that may not be the best solution. So in order to do that, the principals will be trained coming in August about what this timeline will kind of look like for the whole school year. And then depending on kind of how quickly things move, that professional learning for the staff in the Cedar Rapids schools would be dependent on kind of what they need at that moment. So I know that was a lot. I don't know if you want to stop here for some questions or if you want to continue.
Do you guys have any questions at this point?
Were there any was there any curriculum already out there?
Yes.
To view, to look at, and then to model after? And
Absolutely.
will we incorporate, our students in video, stuff like that? So,
Yep.
okay.
So we had representatives from Waterloo schools come and speak about how they do their drills. We had Linmar come out. So what our plan is, as far as the committee goes, is we take all of those things and then kind of Cedar Rapids-ize it to make it our own, so we know that it's right for our kids and what we want to be taught.
Have there been any opportunities to get information from schools that have had something happen where you can take their lessons learned of if they had a plan in place, what of it worked and what didn't, to kind of learn from the unfortunate events that have happened in our school districts?
I can't speak to that, but I can speak from a training stance, and then maybe, officer, if you'd like to answer that question. As a employee of another district prior to being here, we actually practiced those types of drills. And so we took some time and just said, okay, for this round, and we actually had the police officers were in the building and were firing blanks so that, we were actively participating in the drill. And we had the conversation comparing the two. So if we just hide, 90% of us ended up not surviving that scenario. Where if now let's do it again, and now I want you to think about where that threat is coming from and respond how you would respond in a typical situation. And we ran, and I think only one person didn't make that out alive. So just knowing that there are options other than just hiding to try to stay safe, I think is a little bit I don't know, it kind of gives you a little weight off your shoulders knowing that you have more options.
And as a follow-up to that, sorry, what are the plans to debrief, not only with the law enforcement, with the administration, and people running it, but also with the kids?
Good question.
So for the lesson component, I mean, that we would be, like we would do with any sort of lesson, review the results of that lesson and what we need to process to improve. And so that will be part of the feedback loop, I
Okay.
think, with any implementation. What went well, what didn't go well, and what do we need to improve. And the first time we run it, I mean, the design end is one thing, but actually doing it will be something else. But you're absolutely right in that we do have some pretty good resources that have been vetted by other districts, but also there's national curriculums around
Right.
this as well. And the state of Virginia, the University of Virginia has put a lot of investment in this, for example, as a state. So there's lots of national resources we can lean on as well. But it is making sense within the context too, within the physical environment.
Right.
Each one of our own schools is very different.
Right,
And
right.
how we would respond. Yeah.
But we are talking about having a debriefing with the kids as well, not just the
Correct.
adults. Okay.
So when we would conduct our drills in the past, we always had debriefing with staff. We would meet afterwards to kind of go through what went well, what didn't work so well, where could we improve. But adding the student part would be the new piece, so I agree with what Norina said, is that it would be an integral part of what we would have to do in terms of that. I also want to make it clear that we always had discussions with our staff about having options. What we practiced was hide, and that was for a lot of different reasons that we practiced that. But they always knew that they had options, and that was to run, hide, and fight. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear as well, as that we did talk about options. What we did practice was the hide part.
Director Humbles?
So you're saying you said March 2019 is when this will all be in place?
Yeah, that's when the second round of training would be, including the running and the fighting curriculum or the lesson plans that would go along with those.
It's for practice
Yeah.
in the spring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Director Anhalt?
It's just, I just have a sickening in my stomach. It's a sad commentary that we're having to spend this amount of time with educating our students and particularly our teachers to this. We're doing what we need to do, but I just find it really a sad commentary on the state of what we're living in right now. And along with that, the follow-up with the mental health of the students. I lived through my early childhood where we had atomic bomb drills, and it gave me nightmares. Huddling underneath the desk, going down to the basement with drums of, I can still see the green drums of civil defense materials. And now with our media, what our kids are exposed to, it's become very real for them. And so even the trauma of going through, and some of it may not be outwardly exhibited, but I can't help but to think that what we will be subjecting our students to. I'm not criticizing. As I said, we're doing what we need to do, and to protect our students and to let our parents know that we care about our students and will do our best to secure them. But
Those are really good points, and I would just say, over the past, that's part of the reason why we have practiced hide, because of the traumatic events that can occur when you do practice the running and the fighting. We had students and even some staff who were traumatized by just the hiding part. So there is a balance, but what I would say when you started out speaking in the beginning was, we try to take a proactive approach to this. This is a lifelong lesson in learning, and it's not only how we respond when we're at school, but it's also where we respond outside of school. So at the movie theaters, in the grocery stores, in your homes, in your cars. So we try to take it proactive. This is just a way to help prepare. It's no different than we do fire and tornado. And it is just a matter of reality, and you're correct, it is a sad situation, but it is something that we do need to prepare everybody for.
Thank you, good comments, thank you.
Unless there's other questions, we'll move along with the presentation.
Sounds great. And so, outcome 4, practice and drills. Captain Esplin.
Thank you. Let me just first say that I appreciate having the opportunity to be part of this task force and working with the amazing folks here at the school district. We're fortunate in Cedar Rapids. I'm just going to make a few general comments, and then I'll get into my slide. But some of the stuff has already been hit on a little bit, but I think it's important. So we're fortunate in Cedar Rapids that we do have, continue to have, will have a fantastic relationship between our department and the district. We have a robust SRO program, which is integral in what we're talking about here. And we have open lines of communication between our organizations. We talk a lot, so especially during the school year, daily sometimes. I can assure you that our department supports the schools. We work hard to foster relationships with the youth in our community and always want the best for the safety and security of the children and the schools and the staff and the teachers. With that said, it's my pleasure to be part of this task force. Like I'd already mentioned, I attended every meeting, so I got from the start to the finish and got to see the value in the discussions, the process, and the final work product. Based upon the task force recommendations and CRPD's experience with the school district, we're committed to the Run, Hide, Fight program. Run, Hide, Fight's a Department of Homeland Security program. It leads with the run option as being the best option, being that the goal is to get people out of the area where there's a shooter or threat of violence or some type of violence occurring, get them to a place where they can contact authorities, prevent other people from entering into that environment. And if evacuation is an option, hiding's an option as a last resort, fighting, disrupting, incapacitating, whatever violent act they're encountering. So with the Run, Hide, Fight program, we see opportunities to implement a more robust, interactive based training, which we could incorporate additional law enforcement assets and continue to work hard to be sure that everyone involved is prepared. It's not just a school thing, it helps us, it helps our resources too to be part of those practices. And that's a big thing that we talked about, was implementing some more of those interactive based trainings. We hear a lot about ALICE and other programs, which one's better than the other. I'm not going to say that one's better than the other, but what I can say is that Run, Hide, Fight's easy to understand, it's simple terms. It's a concept that's designed for all situations, for lots of situations. And it's similar to the all security programs with the emphasis on the need to have 3 options, okay? So when we're dealing with an active threat. We also talk about, like Laurel said, some life skills and some education that goes beyond the school walls. And these types of programs are taught throughout many different businesses and locations. So we're teaching kids, unfortunately, like was mentioned, some options beyond what happens in school. And at the core of these programs is ongoing training. We're working on the way people think and these programs and mindset, and trying to help people understand that there are proactive measures that people can take to protect themselves and others and to disrupt the intentions of a violent actor or actors. We don't want people to just sit around and wait for law enforcement. There's things people can do if they work within the framework for some actions to work within a framework in violent situations, which is what Run, Hide, Fight does. We want to educate and empower people to make quick decisions that save lives. We know that action does save lives. We feel there's value in the simplicity, like I'd already mentioned, of Run, Hide, Fight. It's easy to remember. It provides a framework for thought in a high-stress environment. There's not as much processing that has to take place. It's easier to deal with. And together with the school district, our department, the CRPD, we've taught Run, Hide, Fight for many years throughout the district. So there's already a framework for the training, and there's value in that consistency of message. So as a school district, they have already mentioned the intent to implement more practice, to start with being the run option in some of the future drills, and then to get into the deeper discussion about what fight looks like for staff and students. Like anything with training, it's a progression. So there's a plan, there's discussion, there's support from our department, and we'll work with the district to help provide safe, controlled training depending on the situation. So with that said, I think I hit most of the points in this. I will step aside and let the next person go.
Thank you so much, Captain. So finally, as with anything, we want to communicate well to our families and to our staff and our community about our commitment as Director Anholt highlighted earlier, our number one commitment is keeping our kids and our staff safe. And it is challenging to have the discussion, and we realize the emotion around it. But as things unfolded in the spring in other states, specifically in Florida, Young America is making a difference around this topic. And they're stepping in the forefront, and they're advocating for themselves, and they're advocating for their peers. And the kids at the voices that were at this table were tremendous, and unfortunately couldn't be here this evening. But their voice is here and present, and they did advocate for their peers, and the high school kids especially feel as though they can make a difference within this planning. So their input will be in part of this process, but they are also, many of them, older siblings, and they will be looking at the eyes of their younger siblings as we consider age appropriateness in the previous slide when we think about those drills. So communication to our families is going to be echoing really where Laurel started, and that is we've been committed to this for a long time, and certainly like many districts around our country and the world really, our awareness is heightened. However, we feel that we do have a very solid foundation of where we've been with Run, Hide, Fight. It's the implementation and deepening our practice that we want to bring awareness to our community. So we do we're presenting, you've gotten a draft of our plan at this point in time. As with any plan, we accept feedback and are willing to certainly be iterative with that process of the feedback. And we would like to invite our friends within the media to understand through a press release our commitment to this proactively and what we're trying to accomplish as a district. Especially, we did partner with Waterloo and Linn-Mar, as we all have relationships perhaps with districts around us. If we are all speaking the same language, it does represent within our community, because it isn't just school, as Laurel said. We want our kids and staff to know how to respond anywhere. I did it with my own children on vacation, who are 17 and 10, about awareness and about knowing your surroundings to any new environment. Then, of course, I've hit on the third point already, but then as we think about our new lessons and our drills that will be enhanced or deepening, we would like to have parent education sessions as well in evenings and events, and that they can respond to. And I think law enforcement is very willing, as always with our partnership, to think about designs for that and getting our parents engaged and their feedback, and that we would have via our district webpage a site specifically dedicated to this with resources for parents so they can discuss it with their kids at home beyond school as well. So with that, I thank you for your questions throughout the presentation, but certainly we are here for more.
Something available after hours for parents and stuff, but as we all know, our district relies, as many districts do, heavily on volunteerism, especially it tends to be at the younger age. We have a lot of volunteers that come in. Is there any thought to what we're going to do for those to help bring those volunteers up to speed so that they are speaking the same language if they're in the building when something like this happens, whether it's a drill or an actual event? I just think that sometimes they're retired folks who wouldn't necessarily get our communiques.
Yeah, there was some conversation around that at the table conversations within the task force, specifically even about the processes of volunteers coming into our building as a safety plan, but also including them in the training. We have substitutes as well. Right. And many guests that we have within our buildings. And so how we operationalize that and communicate it, we haven't gotten into the details of what that would look like, but certainly that surfaced as a discussion, but I'm glad you surfaced it tonight, that we have to make sure that we're scooping the loop with everybody, but having a way to do that might be different for different audiences. So I can imagine our volunteers having just some information as they volunteer for our district, but specific to the building that they're going to, right, having that information available to them as well. Yeah.
I have a question about the depth of communication that is going to be shared regarding process, either directly to staff and parents and community or on the website. I guess I would hate to see the efficacy of a program be undermined by oversharing, because once it is public knowledge.
Sure.
Someone who was going to be
Yes.
presenting an active
Right.
threat would know how to work within the established system.
So there's the intercommunication and then the external communication. So the internal communication from the general slide that Dr. Buck shared would be our curriculum resources. That would really be for internal. External would be for our families to understand how to prevent maybe what Director Anholt was surfacing earlier, that if their child has concerns or surfaces conversations, that they're aware and how to respond at home and then communicate back to us and how to support their children so they're not worried to come to school on the day of a drill, but rather prepared and feeling like they're part of the process and not afraid of the process. But there's also additional resources for parents of how to practice at home and how to talk about being safe at home too. So that would be hopefully the communication resources that we would be communicating. But I don't think that we would make it unknown that we are a run, hide, fight. That's our philosophy and that's what we practice. And so that would not be secretive. Sure. It's just best practice.
Other questions? I do want to mention, safety and security of our students and our staff has always been of paramount priority for the school district and this board. And it is a shame that we're at this point. Through my profession, 28 years visiting high schools all over the country in larger urban districts, years ago, I had to go through metal detectors to get in high schools. I saw police at the front doors, and we in Cedar Rapids were sort of immune from that level of worry. Those events just didn't happen there, but now we know they can happen anywhere. So unfortunately, we have to do that. And I applaud all of you in the committee for all of your work on that. Especially want to thank the City of Cedar Rapids Police Department, the committees, the other folks on the committees. You spent many, many hours, I know, doing this, and it's been of primary importance to the board. I do want the public to know, too, although all of these things are coming into place to help kids and the staff, there is a cost to this, and I think as school districts and as board members, we need to make sure that our legislators understand that this is not free to protect our students and staff. This will cost millions of dollars for a school district the size of Cedar Rapids. And that money is not coming to us out of the state of Iowa right now. That's money that will be taken away from doing other sorts of things to help educate children. And that bothers me a great deal. This is the right thing to do, and we're 100% behind it. But I'm very concerned about that. So when we get into our legislative conversations and we're thinking about what we need to message to our elected officials in Des Moines and at the federal level, we need to come together and let them know that this is money that's going to hurt school districts because it's taking it away from things that are really core to student achievement in their educations. And they need to help us find a way to make sure that there's money to compensate school districts for protecting kids. That's their kids. It's not just our kids, it's their kids as well. So I'll get off my soapbox, but again, this isn't free money. This is money coming from somewhere else. So, any other questions or comments? Thank you all so much. We appreciate your time and effort on this.
Thank you so much.
Next, we're going to move into an administration section and our diversity hiring plan. And I'll turn it over to you, Linda Nagel.
All right, well, good evening, and thank you very much for your time this evening. So I think, there we go. So I have the pleasure of talking with you this evening about creating and promoting a culture of diversity and inclusion. This is a great topic for us to be talking about, and there's lots of employers that are trying to tackle this very topic on how do we create a diversified workforce and how do we bring in talent across the entire nation. And so as the fourth largest employer and the second largest school district, it's important for us to be having this conversation as well. So it's my pleasure to talk a little bit about our preliminary plans and early thinking around how do we go create a strategy around diversity and inclusion. There we go. Oops. There we go. So you've all seen this. This is our strategic plan. And we did have, under the workforce this year, we did have a goal around diversity, hiring and inclusion. And that goal was about creating and understanding what that strategy might look like as we move into the future. So some of the expected outcomes. Our diversity and inclusion plan will allow us to improve our recruitment and retention strategies with an intentional focus on diversity hiring, which will be closely aligned then to our values and our mission and our vision statement as well. We want to create a process that can be measured and reported on, which is really important when you have a diversity and inclusion plan, that you have measurements and you have metrics and we know how we're doing against our benchmarks. The program will allow us to attract top talent across the district and across the United States. And we hope to have less turnover of some of our key talent. So when we do have that talent, we want to focus on that turnover aspect. And improve decision-making with diverse input and worldviews. There's lots and lots of research out there that shows that when you have diverse thinking, you have more innovation, creativity, and problem solving. And so those diverse perspectives are incredibly important as we think about our school district. Our vision is to build a highly engaged workforce that embraces diversity. So really that's what we want to focus on in this strategy. This year we had a little bit of research that we did. So when we started thinking about our diversity and how will we go and move forward and start to begin putting this plan together, we actually had two research products that were done for us. One was from the Creative Corridor Center of Equity. They went and did some interviewing of both current and former employees and people of color to ask and to talk with them about what is it that attracts them to Iowa, what attracts them to the school districts, and what keeps them. And then we also did a second study around Education Advisory Board, and they went out and talked to a number of our peer schools and talked with them about what is their strategy and what are their plans. So under the Creative Corridor Center for Equity, one of the things that they talked about is diversifying the teacher workforce is beneficial for the students of color, which makes a lot of sense. You have somebody who looks like you, has some of the same experiences as you, and also they're a great role model. So students kind of acclimate to that. The teachers of color turnover is much higher, so you do have to focus on both the retention and the recruiting. It is a two-part piece to this. You can't focus on one without focusing on the other, so they kind of go hand in hand and at parallel. Some of the recommendations that came from this study is to focus on teachers who have left the state, so they're already familiar with Iowa, trying to attract them back to Iowa. Focusing on students of color at the local universities, and we have some great partnerships. We've already started a wonderful partnership with UNI, as well as some of our other partner schools here in the area. And then any out-of-state students who have lived in rural areas, the study talked about individuals who are used to our climate, so the Iowa weather. So folks that are used to our Iowa weather, they're more apt to come back and stay in Iowa than to come and then leave. And then the one that we're going to talk a little bit about is the current middle and high school students of color in Iowa. So really growing your own programs. So where we have individuals who show an early interest in teaching, let's try to understand and help them as they guide through their middle school, high school, and then ultimately into college. And there's a lot of different things that we can do around that area. And some of the thoughts are, how do we support them through that journey? Are there things that we can do from a scholarship perspective? Are there things that we can do to help them mentor with them, help them navigate that type of thing? And that's a real opportunity for us to really think about our current students. And we all know we love alumni that come back to the district, and so how can we grow that program here? Some of the recommendations for retention is improve the racial climate in schools and increase the number of administrators of color and open more pathways for advancement of teachers of color. From the Education Advisory Board, again, this is they talked to a number of our peer schools, and they talked with them about their best practices as well as how have they created strategies. And some of the research out of this one came with It's important that we have goals and we promote accountability across the district. Most districts promote both short and long-term goals, and I think one of the things I'm going to talk about here in a little bit is the journey that happens with the diversity and inclusion, and it's definitely a journey. So having that short and long-term goals is going to be important. Incorporating a diversity statement into our job descriptions and interviewing questions, so it has to be part of our recruiting process, and publishing those goals, and most importantly on this one for me is designating a focal point for the diversity strategy to promote the continuous program. It's really important for us to give thought to who's going to do this work, because it's very difficult to have a diversity strategy and have that be a drop-in work for an individual. It really is a full-time role, and there's a lot of work and a lot of effort to do this right. And so focusing on that individual who's going to be that point of contact. So the model for diversity and inclusion, there's really three pillars here. The first one is the talent management, which is development and maintain a workforce that is representative of our student population. Our student minority enrollment right now is approximately 32%, and we want to make sure our demographics within our schools represent that as well. And so we want to get closer aligned to that piece of it. From a workplace perspective, create a workplace where employees are enabled and empowered to contribute their individual talents to realize our future ready, every learner future ready vision. And then lastly, develop and strengthen our positive relationships in our community. There's a lot of work that we can be doing with our community partners, understanding what our community partners have done in this area, as well as just partnering with them from a diversity perspective. The diversity and inclusion maturity model, so this shows the pathway. Again, this is a journey for us to really grow from our diversity and inclusion perspective of where we're at today. This is a multi-year process. You can't just make diversity happen in a year. It's something that you have to continuously grow and develop and continuously learn. And so it starts with growing your awareness, and this is really the first part of where we're at, is where do we want to be from a diversity? Why is diversity and inclusion important? Starting to have some of these initial conversations around this topic. And then talking about establishing a diversity program, and so that would be the next step, is establishing a program. And then ultimately you get to accountability and then inclusion for all. And so, and again, that takes a number of years to get through that process. It's very important from a diversity perspective that it is part of your strategic plan as well. And again, it's not just a task or an activity that someone is doing.
So when you talk about strategic plan, are you talking about the district's strategic plan or HR specific?
Districts.
District,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. And we have that included in our district plan today. So I think as we get more mature in this, it'll become more robust. Mm-hmm. So just diving a little bit deeper into each one of these areas. So growing your awareness, this is really the year one type activity. And again, the first thing that we would need to do is identify a focal point that's going to go off and do this work. And so when you think about the work that needs to be done, there's a strategic component to that. So there's this piece of what is our strategy going to be? What are our goals going to be? What are our metrics going to be? What's the team going to look like? All of those different things that need to happen. Having a point of contact to do that is critical. And then establishing a recruitment team or a committee. So we don't want to do this diversity program in isolation. We want to make sure that we are including our staff and our community in this effort as well. And so really leading sort of a team to think about this and think about what the strategy might look like for us. And some of the things that they would do at the end of the first year, after this team has been commissioned together and they've started talking about what they want that strategy and that program to look like, they would submit a proposal, which would be very detailed as to exactly what they're going to do in the second to fifth year or third year. So in the next year, establish a diversity program. Again, developing the strategies that meet our demographics are going to be important. What are our metrics? And then how do we integrate that with the whole recruiting and retention program that we have? Okay. Year 2, then moving into the accountability phase, which is finalizing our metrics and our reporting. So at that point, we should understand exactly what we're measuring and what our benchmarks are. We should also make sure that we support and implement a diversity mentoring program and providing support to our administrators around their goals, each of the buildings having their own particular goal and what they're focused on from a diversity perspective. And then finally, moving into an inclusive culture, which we will get lots of feedback as we continue to do through the employee engagement survey. We're able to diagnose where some of our opportunities and some of our gaps might be. So looking at this from a recruitment and retention perspective, so if I were to summarize this really quickly, what I would be looking at is basically 3 things that we want to try to accomplish right out of the gate. The first thing is around the recruitment perspective, is how do we clean up our recruitment processes today to make sure that we have the right statements, the right branding, the right information, that we're interviewing appropriately, that we're asking the right questions, all of those things around recruitment. The second piece would be how do we engage with our colleges, our local colleges, from a campus perspective. What are the programs that they have for their diverse students, and how do we engage with them? How do we start having conversations and start building relationships with our campus teams? And then finally, how do we begin to create pathway for our existing students? So that's really the, if I summarize this and what we need to do when we get out of the gate, those are probably the top 3 goals that we would have. And then from a retention perspective, starting to think about how do we create mentor programs for our underrepresented staff, and how do we continue, as Rod does very well today, continuing the work around the culture climate transformation. And we learn a lot from the work that he does there, and how do we take that information and that work and incorporate it into our diversity plan. And finally, just making inclusion an emphasis within our district. So really, today we probably don't talk about this topic very often. It doesn't come up a lot, and so we need to make that kind of part of our language and part of our branding as well. Diversity and inclusion is important, and these are the reasons why. So some of the measurements, again, this is just assessing our current retention and separation reasons for diverse, so understanding our current state, and meeting with our administrators to understand any barriers or challenges that they might have, and then evaluate the candidate pool to really assess and understand our candidate pool today. We probably don't have a really good handle on what does that funnel look like when they're coming in from a recruiting perspective. I mean, I couldn't stand here and tell you we have X% that are coming in and then dropping out on the back end. So we have some work that we need to do around that piece of it. And then I think that it's really important to look at this by building and assess by building what diversity needs to look like by building and by location. I'll pause for a moment. Any questions? Yeah.
I do. I'm looking at this diversity and inclusion strategy map. I just want to make sure I'm getting this clear, that in year 2, that's when the hire and you'll be doing the hiring?
So, no, in year 2, we'll be developing the strategies. And so in year 2, that's when we'll get really clear on what are our goals and what's the benchmark and what's the information, what are we trying to accomplish as we move forward.
So
but the hiring, as far as, do you mean hiring of staff, or do you mean hiring of
diversifying the workforce?
Yep.
I guess that's my question.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a 3-year process before this is initiated and we diversify our workforce?
Yeah, we'll be growing. So we'll be growing from the very beginning. So as soon as we hire a diversity resource, if that's what we decide to do, that person will begin the entire program. So I would say what they would start with is about maybe 50 to 60% of this is going to be what's our long-term strategy and where do we want to be, as we kind of go through the journey. But 40% of that's going to be initial interviewing, hiring, retention, trying to do these partnerships with our campus schools, our universities, understanding our current dynamics, that type of thing. So we would start right away.
Yeah, and
so that would be that would start, because when I'm looking at this and I see 2 to 3 years, I guess for me it's a concern that one of our focus is to diversify the workforce within the district.
Correct.
With the shifting of our demographics. And then you say, work with our other partners? I noticed that you mentioned UNI,
Mhm.
but what other institutions are you partnering with besides, and I think it's important, local, but
Mhm.
sometimes I think we have to
Yes.
go outside
Yes.
of the local? And how are we collaborating and developing relationships so teachers of color would want to come to Cedar Rapids and work within our district?
Right. Excellent point, and I couldn't agree with you more. So the local colleges, we know that we have a population within the local colleges in the local area that we can pull, or hopefully pull talent from. But we also need to assess and evaluate and understand where are other schools or other colleges that we would also be able to pull from, that they would have they would also want to relocate to Cedar Rapids. And so part of what this role would be is to assess that whole outside of the local area and identify schools that would be potentials for us to engage with and build relationships and partnerships with.
Yeah, so one of the things that's that slide that shows the work that was done by EAB and the other research firm, there's some overlap of sort of immediate things to do. And so these things will be happening in tandem, as
Right.
Linda is acknowledging. And some of the great news here is, when you think about Mount Mercy, UNI, and the University of Iowa, we have a number of institutions that are really pretty close to us that have the same active priorities that we have in terms of attracting and retaining students with diverse backgrounds, racially and ethnically diverse kids. So this, I think, is the initial short-term opportunity in that 40 or 50% that you're describing, is reinforcing and talking about connections with our local universities and colleges. And then a longer-term strategy is, do we get into conversations with historically black colleges and universities? And that probably turns into a bit longer strategy, because that issue related to the temperature, that's a thing that came out of that research. I mean, it is an actual living where it's cold and that sort of thing. So that becomes, I think, part of the longer-term strategy. But we probably have not yet tapped into even our local institutions at the level we probably could. And then at the Kids on Course University event, there was a little girl, I think she's in 5th grade, and she announced that in a video that she wants to be a teacher. So we know that there are likely kids in our system as another dimension to this activity to recruit within our existing system. So I think it'll happen in layers, if that's helpful.
Director Anhalt?
A couple of things. One, I believe when you talk about the long term, if we're also talking about retention, some of this we also have to build or strengthen the culture within our community, within our schools, within our community, and that doesn't happen. We can bring in a new hire, but to retain and keep them, they also need those other components, and
Right.
that doesn't happen overnight. The other, as I was thinking through this, I was thinking, because we've been at this for a long time, but an avenue that just hit me is, and you hit on it a little bit, our business communities. There are a great number of, we talk about going out and recruiting at the colleges, but I think it's a fact that there are a great number of people that have degrees that are not using them. And if we start looking at and working with some of our businesses, might be stronger retention if their spouse is also working in the community, and it would give them more of a reason to be here. So to have those conversations as businesses start hiring and looking at creating a package deal, hey, we've got an opportunity, and we could really use what you have. So I think that's an avenue that maybe we haven't looked at strong enough.
Yeah, very good suggestion. And I think that's why this resource is important, is because a lot of what happens from a diversity and inclusion is building relationships. And it's about making those connections from a community perspective, making those connections at the schools, understanding schools outside of our local area, talking with people, and oftentimes it's a lot to ask somebody to relocate, to have their family relocate to Iowa. And so you might be engaging in conversations over months of a period of time. It's not usually oh, yep, I'm ready to go. And so we may be engaging with people over a long period of time, which means that we need to build long-term relationships with them and really support them and support our community and talk about the benefits of moving to Cedar Rapids. And I just want to come back for a minute, Nancy, on your question about what are the initial things that we're doing right out of the gate. And I think I don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are some immediate things that we can be doing. And one of those is just simply from a recruiting perspective, making sure that our job descriptions have diversity statements in them, making sure that we are asking interview questions that are around diversity, ensuring that we are looking at our applicants and ensuring that the most qualified people are getting interviewed, and then also making those connections from a campus team perspective. So there's a number of things that we can do right away as we are building this program.
So there's one thing that I kind of wondered, and maybe it'll kind of lead us into the next slide, I think, but surely we're not the only district, we're not the only institution that is looking at this particular issue to improve their diversity throughout their workforce.
Right.
What's going to differentiate us?
Yeah, and so I think I think that's something that we have to think about when we start to consider our branding around diversity, and we start putting those stories together. There's a lot of things that differentiate Cedar Rapids from some of our other school districts, and being able to highlight that and being able to attract candidates to come to Cedar Rapids will be important. I think that will be part of what this resource as well as the committee will have to figure out. Because it's important. It is important.
Well, and I think too, the retention piece is really important because you could highly recruit, get folks here, but if you do not get them connected to the community and have someone that's really aware of what is here in this community, they're not going to stay, because you can recruit and recruit.
Yep.
But if they do not get connected to this community and someone that is very knowledgeable of how to thrive in this community, we won't retain any of the folks that we're recruiting.
Yeah, excellent point. And there's a lot of research around that shows that, and I personally have some experience with that in my previous life of recruiting as well. And you can do a lot of great recruiting tactics, and those are some of the right out of the gate, the low-hanging fruit that we can go after, but the retention is equally as important. And they have to run parallel, and you have to have a strategy. Because again, if we just went out and we focused only on hiring, which we could do tomorrow, that's only going to get us so far without having a long-term plan.
So are we gathering some data when you were talking grow your own on middle school and high school? Are we aware of students that have an interest in becoming teachers? Is there some data out there?
So that navigator or KDAN.
You don't have a microphone. Do you want me to do this? Because I have a microphone.
Yeah, you want it, you do it.
Sure. So the Cooter Career Development Tool that students at the high school level are taking, it gives you understanding across one of, I think it's 16 career clusters. So we would actually be able to know students who have an interest, aptitude in potentially become teachers. So it isn't just casting a broad net. It's saying we actually can go into Cooter results and find the names of students who have interest and aptitude potentially in becoming teachers. So, yeah.
And we did a really small sort of last-minute pilot with UNI this year, and I can't remember. Do you remember the number of students that we were able to engage in that?
Invited to have 10,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it was a great opportunity for us to start thinking about that. And we had initiated that conversation with you and I at the very beginning of the school year. So it was great that before the year was out, they had a program that they were interested in piloting and invited us into that. So we know that that's an opportunity for us to grow, and we'll have students that are interested in that. So.
I have a question regarding strategies for long-term retention and mentoring. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for teacher leadership to have some growth in that area.
Yep. Yeah, I think so.
specifically around diversity.
Yeah. I think we're all going to have to grow our aptitude around diversity and inclusion, and that's a great place to start and think about. Mhm. Don't give her a mic. Okay, any other questions?
I just want to say, the board has been supportive and really encouraging of this for a long time. We've had a lot of stops and starts and stops, and this seems like probably the most clear plan that we've had, and actually, some staffing that are dedicated to this, which is great, and it feeds into some of the other work that's been going on in the district. So kudos to Dr. Buck and all of you that have been working on this plan and this effort. What else do you need from us as a board to be supportive of this? I mean, this is part of our priority. It's part of our strategic initiatives to have this happen. So all these have been great comments, but what else can we do to continue to support the work?
Great lead into my last slide here.
Great.
So really, honestly, in full transparency, the biggest thing that I need is a resource. If we want to do this right and we want to do it in a way that we are creating a true strategy and a program, it's going to take some dedicated resources to be able to do that. Approximately 65 to 75K from a salary perspective to be competitive.
So Dave, you got that figured out already? Steve leaves that for you?
Steve Graham approved it before he left.
I think the board's very interested in that.
Another thing that we have to consider that we haven't spoken a lot about is as we look outside of our state and we start looking at bringing talent into our district, that comes with a cost as well, around relocation costs and that type of thing. So we'll need to think about what a program around relocation would look like and how we assess that and how we pay for that. We will also need to think about new sourcing strategies. What are the correct job boards to be advertising on, and where can we tap into some of that diversity talent? And that's going to come with a cost as we think about our sourcing strategies and different job boards and advertising and marketing and that type of thing. And then we will have a little bit of an investment of, again, I don't want to lose sight of this diversity recruitment committee, of having a group of people that are thought partners as we kind of put all of this together. So really what I need from you is approval to move forward and create a diversity program. And then we will hire and select a diversity resource and identifying our diversity committee.
I have one additional question here, and that is, I just want to know if there are plans to make sure that we have curriculum lined up that is also going to be inclusive of diversity.
Great question.
So we have had several opportunities throughout that, just in my own, your experience here. So certainly it's happened a lot, I think, through our literacy curriculums, but making sure that it's represented throughout many of our curriculums. We've even had some conversations around our health curriculums and thinking about diversity, not just through race and ethnicity, but also through our LGBTQ community for our students, and to make sure that all communities are represented in our communities or in our curriculum. So that is a constant conversation, but I think what we need to do is make it more of the front-running leading question around access for all students, and that's students from learning needs, from all sorts of diversity backgrounds, as well as our special education programming. And so we are going to be leading. You met Ryan Reedstrom and Craig Burnham and John Rice. Now, these are questions that were all part of their hiring process and leading questions that we had through their interview process as well. So helping us make sure that we have guiding questions throughout our curriculum development, instructional development, and assessment development.
Good.
Other questions or comments? Thank you so much, Linda, and everyone that had all that time and effort into that. That's terrific. And the board will definitely look forward to hearing the progress of that as you move forward in the next year.
Very excited. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next, we'll move on to board governance, and I'll turn it over to Director Ann Halden Laurel Day for the 2019 IASB legislative platform.
Go ahead.
Just kind of a brief overview of what we're doing tonight. IASB at its fall conference will set through the electoral process of the delegates what the priorities will be going into the next legislative session. You have seen the 31 resolutions that were presented to the board and approved by the body last fall. But they also want some direction of, we can only stretch our focus so far. So they're looking at having 4 priorities that they would very aggressively lobby for and work with legislation. So they're asking for help from our board to what we would think, what our opinions are of the priorities of this 31 resolutions. And isn't it very timely that we just got done talking about several things that concern funding and not having adequate funding and not having the resources to be able to move forward. So at this time, just to move it along, some of you, John, has turned in their priorities before the meeting. So if I could get just the opinion of the rest of the board. So Nancy, if you would could you give me 4 and just use the numbers, because that'll.
I have number 4, number 6, number 7, and number 27.
4, 6,
7,
and
27.
7. Kristen,
Oh, for gosh sakes.
I'll come back to you.
Thanks.
Raphael,
All right.
can you give me 4?
Yep.
It doesn't have to be 4, but if you have 4,
7,
hold on, okay, 7,
20,
20,
27,
27,
and 29.
and 29. Mary has phoned in that she would like 4 marks, but I don't think that would be fair on number 27. And as we get through, I'm going to tell what they had. I would agree.
Funding,
It might
funding.
skew the results a little bit. Jennifer,
Yes, sir. Like 7, 8,
okay,
27,
7, 8,
27, and 28.
28.
Now you're back to me.
Are you ready? I could give mine if you need another minute.
Well, no, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Mine was, I wrote in big letters at the bottom, budget, budget, budget. Funding is huge. So I agree with Mary. I would like to put all 4 on budget-related stuff, but instead of doing that, I said 7, 20, and 27. I just did 3.
Okay. Just for your reference, I did 7, 14, I did 19, seems to be a lone wolf there, 27, and, yeah, and that was it. So, our
Just-
high scores were, 7 was mental health, improving resources on mental health. Number 27 is SAVE, which is very important. And then we have a scattering of things. We have supplemental state aid, number 20, and we would have had one more here that had 2 votes.
I would just add that while we're submitting our top 4, so is every other school district in the state of Iowa. So while these may be some legislative priorities for us, they will vary across the state. So if we could choose our top 4, the deadline for submission is August 11th, which is prior to our next
Right.
board meeting. So if you have some suggestions on which other 2 you'd like to choose.
We had a couple of votes that were consistent with benefits, and I think it's maybe tying to doing something with the statewide, trying to create maybe a statewide or help with our benefit situation. And the other one,
I had put I had turned mine in earlier, but I had put preschool funding as a top priority because I hear from so many of our staff how a lot of the kids just aren't coming in prepared, and the state has seemingly pulled back on preschool funding. And with our changing demographics, if we don't get to these kids earlier with more intentionality, it's going to be that much harder once those kids get into the district. So that was just, again, it's a funding issue, but it's also get these kids on the right start, and there's plenty of data, I think, to show support. And then benefits, over 80% of our budget, general education funds, are staff-related and salaries and benefits. And, you know, we were lucky this year, as I recall, benefits, in terms of healthcare and things turned out fairly well. But over the course of a number of years, they've gone up significantly, and depending on how MIP goes and all those things, you know, a larger pool, using that statewide pool, could potentially give us some additional savings and maybe even some better options for some of our staff in terms of benefits. So,
John, I would like to, again, I was a lone wolf on it, but the school funding policy, I think so much of our problems right now are going back to that, the formula, the way it's generated. I'm really discouraged. The way I perceive the legislation acting right now is they determine a budget and then they figure out how they can divide it up. And we in education end up on the short stick because they just say, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, it's not there. And I think we need to relook at our overall state funding, what the formula is, and that should be determined, and then they look at that and say, how do we come up with the resources? This is what education is going to take. Now, it's our job to provide the resources for that. So I would like to see a real emphasis on redoing the state formula. It's not an easy thing, but I think it should be a priority because so many of our ills seem to come back from we just don't have the resources, and a lot of it is based on the current formula.
So what we have is number 7, mental health, number 27, save. There was some consensus on benefits, number 14. And then if you're wanting to go along with the school funding policy or state supplemental aid, that would be 19 or 20.
thoughts?
I think that along with your preschool comment, I think that early literacy is also kind of dovetails with that and goes hand in hand with that and is a big indicator of success of our students. Moving forward with their graduation rates and their secondary school goals or their career goals, I do think that should hold some importance in this discussion.
Can we submit more than 4 or?
Can we do more than 4, or is it just limited to 4?
They're asking for 4. And I think last time we tried to combine a couple because we had 5 and.
Every school district is submitting their priorities.
I mean, if somebody wants to do early literacy instead of preschool, I'm fine with that. I'm flexible. I mean, we've done this enough that I think what Laurel said is correct, that we can put several of these in and know that lots of other school districts are also going to have priorities. And
One of my selections was early literacy, and it kind of goes hand with the preschool. I agree with Jennifer too.
Do it. Do I have any other support for the school funding policy?
I would lean towards, funding's gonna be I think we can anticipate that funding is gonna be a big hot topic for a lot of the districts.
So I'll move off benefits and add to your funding.
But I think whether it be preschool or early literacy, I think we need to include one of those.
One of those.
One of
Yeah.
those two in the
Yeah.
top four.
Yeah.
And early literacy?
Preschool or early literacy.
I'm moving off preschool and adding early literacy.
Okay.
Let's go with early literacy, mental health, so 4, 7, 27, and then what's the fourth one?
Funding.
School funding policy, is that what?
The supplemental state aid had a couple of votes, but that's pretty well, I think it's pretty well mute, really. We've advocated in the past, one of the reasons it's been up there is that they haven't brought it up early in the session, and it's come in late, and they did a better job last year, but it's all gonna be about funding, so.
So I'll move mine from 20, I'll support 19 then too.
Yep,
I'm
I
good with
would
that.
agree with that too.
4,
did you
7,
say,
27,
Krista?
and 19.
4, 7, I'm gonna switch from 20 to 19, so.
To 19?
Yeah, so 4, 7, 19, and 27?
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
I like how that all moved along. It's amazing what a board can do when they put their mind to it.
John, if I could have just one more on the legislative.
Yes.
And I think we received a little note from, or you did, and you forwarded to me, from one of our IASB lobbyists, and he brought forth a good recommendation. Between now and the legislation time, there's going to be elections, and there are going to be candidates, and there are going to be incumbents that are out talking and stumping and so on. And I think the point being, it behooves us to make contact with those people, the incumbents, and let them know what our priorities are, and get a commitment, try to get them to commit to being supportive of our issues. And I will just throw, and I don't, no matter what party, no matter what you do, I do know that you have more credence, and you do have more beholding if you happen to be willing to work on a candidate's campaign and work with them. And so I'm just, whoever they be, whatever, I'm apolitical, that I do know that when they know that you've tried to help them, on the other end of it, they're more willing to listen to you come legislative. That's just human nature, so.
Does
Not
it-
a requirement, just a suggestion.
Does it have to be incumbents, Gary?
No,
I
he's
said
saying any candidate.
any
Okay.
candidates. I did not.
Okay,
Just open-
I heard it
just
incorrectly.
open to-
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right, thanks to everybody. That's, again, a precursor to all the work that the school board does, this school board and other school boards, in advocating for public education, our students and our community at the legislative level. So lots of good stuff there. Next, we're going to move into the appointment of a school district board secretary. And with that, Gary, would you like to read the resolution?
I will, as I scroll down. I'm sorry, you caught me off guard here. Just a minute, I'll get there. Almost there.
It's page 76 in the,
I have it.
I move that the Board of Education approve the appointment of Laurel A. Day as Cedar Rapids Community School District Board Secretary of the Board of Directors in the County of Lynn, State of Iowa, for a term of 1 year beginning July 16th, 2018, and shall qualify for said appointment by taking the oath of office in the manner required by Section 277.28, and thereafter shall hold office until a successor is appointed and qualified and that this action shall be entered of record in the minutes. Does that need to be second?
Yes.
There needs to be a second. Great, and this is a roll call vote.
Director Borcherding.
Aye.
Director Jacobo.
Aye.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
Director Jansen.
Aye.
President Laverty.
Aye. Unanimous. Congratulations, Laura. Now, if you join me up here, Mrs. Day, and we'll take the oath of office.
That's fine.
Do you, Laurel A. Day, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the office of Secretary of the Cedar Rapids Community School District in the County of Lynn, State of Iowa, as now or hereafter required by law? If so, please respond by saying, I do.
I do.
Congratulations. Thank you so much. Congratulations. Thank you for all your service as board secretary.
President
Next.
Laverty, I have another motion.
You have another one.
I do.
Awesome. Terrific.
It is recommended that I move that the Board of Education approve the appointment of Dave Nicholson as Cedar Rapids Community School District Treasurer of the Board of Directors in the County of Lynn, State of Iowa, for a term of 1 year, beginning July 16, 2018, and shall qualify for said appointment by taking the oath of office in the manner required by Section 277.28, and thereafter shall hold office until a successor is appointed and qualified. And this action shall be entered of record in the minutes.
And is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Great, and this is also a roll call vote?
Director Jacobo.
Aye.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Anhalt.
Without hesitation, aye.
Director Jansen.
Aye.
Director Borcherding.
Aye.
President Laverty.
Aye. Unanimous again. If you would like to join us up here, Dave? If you'd raise your right hand. Do you, David Nicholson, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the office of Treasurer of the Cedar Rapids Community School District in the County of Lynn, State of Iowa, as now and hereafter required by law? If so, please respond by saying, I do.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you so
Welcome
much.
on board.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the board looks for many years of working with you, just as our secretary of the board has had and your predecessor had with the district. It's a great place to work and lots of amazing things going on. So welcome on board from all of us. With that, we have one more item, and I'll turn that over to Laurel Day.
Pursuant to Iowa Code, it's my duty to notify you of the recommendation to terminate the employment and continuing contract of the employee named in your agenda. This does not require any action. It is simply for your information.
Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate that information. And now, we want to turn it over to Linda Noggle. And sadly, we'll have a moment of silence for a departed employee.
I'm actually going to introduce Ann Faber, who would like to honor her employee, John, and do the moment of silence.
Good evening. I'd like to ask the board to close our meeting in a moment of silence as we recognize the life of one of our teachers, John Trofton. John Trofton passed away on July 9th, 2018, due to his heart condition. He began his career at the Cedar Rapids Community School District 7 years ago at our AEC program. He then taught at Polk, Tanager, and within the last year at Jefferson High School. Through the years, John dedicated his time in teaching our students how to do math and related his lessons to career-focused problems. He enjoyed starting his day with riddles and jokes to capture the interest of his students. John's contagious smile and positive outlook on life will be greatly missed. John not only made a difference with our students, but also with his colleagues.
If we could all just take a moment of silence.
John, I have
Oh,
more.
I'm sorry.
I had to take a moment. John enjoyed spending his time with his family, completing construction projects within his house, technology, going to his kids' events, grilling a great piece of meat, and making his coworkers laugh. John is survived by his wife, Krista, children Samantha, James, Kaylee, and Ethan, mother, Ginger, brother Lenny, sister Katie, and nieces and nephews. He was preceded in death by his father. As we observe this moment of silence in memory of John, let us remember the lives of the students and staff he has positively impacted throughout his career and employment of our school district.
Thank you. If we could all take a moment. Thank you. And from the board, we want to extend our condolences to John and his family and all of you that worked with John on a regular basis, and those students as well. So thank you for being here, Ann, and sharing that with us. And on that note, for the board, just a reminder that there are lots of things coming up on the school board calendar. And if you have comments or ideas, to include those on the board evaluation. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.